removal.
Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Eternal Journey. I'm Jedi, also known as Caesar the Crowd Pleaser, and this is going to be episode 10, where I am going to be doing a tournament report on my ECQ HomeComing gameplay, as well as having some spoilers for the upcoming campaign that is supposed to, I believe, be released later next month. But first things first, I want to go ahead and mention our YouTube channel, EJthePodcast on YouTube. If you guys like the great content we are putting out, and by we I mean me, both live on Twitch as well as gameplay videos on drafting, constructed, sealed, and singleton, definitely check it out. I have various things to include this podcast if you aren't listening to it already. So definitely check that out. Also, if whatever platform you're listening to this on, if you can give us a like, 5-star rating or review, it is really appreciated. It goes a long way towards kind of continuing this process. It does a lot more than you think. So thank you so much for everyone that's already done it and is going to do it. All right, well, as per usual, we will open up the episode with our pack one pick one, where I'm going to crack open a pack of Defiance and see talk about it as if we were opening up for a draft and it was our pack one pick one. So I already have our pack open here, and let's start off right off the bat with a powerhouse of a card. We have Kasul Beastmaster. That's right. It is the 5/5 Shaman for 5 power, 1 fire, 1 justice, 1 primal. So tri-faction, the Extune faction, has Overwhelm, and it has Renown. Play a 2/2 flyer squirrel. This card is phenomenal. It 5/5 for 5 with Overwhelm is already great stats and cost. The problem is it is tough to pick 3 colors right off the bat for our first pick. So sadly, even though it is a great card, we're not looking to take it here. Next up is Unmoored Valkyrie, the 1/1 Valkyrie for 1 and a Justice, Flying, and Renowned Lifesteal. Just alright. Next up we have Frost Talisman. It is a relic for 2 and a primal. Pay 7 to draw a card, and you can do this as many times on a turn as you like. So if you ever get up to 14 power, you can draw 2 cards a turn. And when you summon it, it stuns an enemy unit. All right, I probably take this in a blind spot over Valkyrie, just because I feel like it goes into more decks, and you're always happy having 1 in your deck. Next up, Kasul Huntsman. This is the 1/3 Explorer Gunslinger for 2 and a primal, and Renowned Killer. It's fine. It's a solid 2-drop. I don't hate taking it. Next up, we have Steely Resolve. This is a fast spell for 0 and a primal. Negate an enemy spell with cost 1 or less. Mainly taking out Torch, Finest Hour, things like that. Be Gone. So it's not horrible, but I'm not excited about it. We have a Token of Instinct, Depleted Power. It is the Genev. So Time, Fire, Primal faction. Great card. Still not taking it first pick. Next is Borrowed Violence. Yeah, I'm not gonna really get into that. And lastly, on the common slot will be Blaze. Deal damage to an enemy equal to the number of units you gain that much armor for 4. It is 4 fire, justice, or shadow. So wind chest, and it is a slow spell. I'm not really excited about that. Going to our uncommons, we have Sustaining Harp. Yeah, we're not worried about gaining life, even in the Gain Life Matters deck, so that's not it. Next up, we have Display of Instinct, which is a phenomenal display. It is seeing play in constructed, but once again, really hard pressed to take a tri-faction card first pick because we have no idea what we're going to be dealing with. So I think it's just always a safer bet to kind of keep ourselves open, which our final uncommon actually does a pretty good job of this. It is Loyal Falcon. It is a 2/4 bird for 4 Justice. It has Flying, Endurance, and Pledge. This card is phenomenal. It's in a faction that goes really well with solid equipment that we could slap on it, and the Endurance just makes it that much better. If you happen to really need to, you can Pledge it. And it has Evasion with Flying, and it's just a great body. So I think Loyal Falcon is going to be in the pick in the pack. And oh, wait a minute. Our rare for this pack is Shingain Firebrand. It is a 4/3 Oni warrior for 4 double fire. It has pledge, so if you have it in your opening hand, you could ship it or play it as a fire sigil and get rid of it forever. Just kidding, not forever, just for the rest of the game. And it has renown, deal damage to an enemy equal to the cost, excuse me, of that spell or weapon. So actually, it's a pretty tough pick between the two of them, but I think I would end up going for Shingain Firebrand. Reason being is both Justice and Fire go play very well together. Fire is a very deep and strong color. A 4/3 for 4 is just perfectly all right. So they're kind of comparable on bodies, but the fact that it is a 2 for 1 or at least 2 for 2 because of the fact that renown triggers can be a removal spell, or actually that's pretty much the only way you'll really do it. If you slap the 1/3 shield on it for 4 or the 2/2 lifesteal mace for 6, you're doing 4 and 6 damage, which potentially can kill a really relevant unit and make your firebrand that much bigger. So, and it is one faction, a faction I don't mind being in. So yeah, I would take the Shingain Firebrand here. So yeah, that does it for our pack 1 pick 1. Hope you guys enjoyed that and got something out of it. But all right, let's move on to the main topic, which is the tournament report. So middle March, Direwolf Digital had their Homecoming ECQ, which is the Eternal Championship Qualifier, where you are able to play across the excuse me, forgive me, pretty late, about 3:30 in the morning right now where I'm recording this for you guys. But you play 28 games across a 2-day period roughly, and the top 64 records or players will continue on to day 2, which would be in Sunday, to play for, obviously, to take it down for $2,000 and an invite to the championship. After trying out several decks on the ladder, trying to figure out what to play, I'm not on a team or anything like that, so I'm doing all this research on my own. The 2 decks I decided to go with were going to be Winchest, which is pretty common, or Fire Justice Primal, FJP, Shadow, FJS, which is pretty much just a bunch of value creatures with a bunch of removal, and you hope you just get there, and Haunted Highway. I tried out Skycrag. I just didn't really like it. Felt it was a little weak. I mean, there were some games where you just stole, but there were too many games where you just didn't have enough value to catch up. And I had the most success with both Haunted Highway and Winchest in the ladder. So I decided with minimal testing that I was going to go with those 2. After a little bit more grinding with Winchest, I realized that I felt like the mirror match was really grueling, and it ended up being one of those things where just whoever had the better draw, where the spells lined up better, ended up taking down the game. They were always a slugfest, and I just feel like it was a little more luck of the draw. So I wasn't too thrilled about it and decided to switch over to a more aggressive strategy and try to get underneath what some of these other decks were doing, and went with Haunted Highway. Haunted Highway can be considered either an aggro deck or a combo deck. Reason being is that despite being a quote-unquote aggressive deck, it actually typically has the first 2 turns being with depleted power because it is a tri-faction deck. You are looking for double Shadow, double Primal, and double Fire to essentially effectively act out your game plan. The deck revolves around 3 to 4 cards, primarily Haunting Scream, which is a 2-cost spell that takes a unit from your void, puts it into play with flying and charge, and then you have to destroy it at the end of the turn. So you really want things that capitalize on enter the battlefield summon effects or doing something hitting your opponent. Next is Vicious Highwayman, which is so those 2 cards make up the namesake of the deck, which is the Stone Scar, 4/2, has charge, and it deals 1 damage when it comes into play. If it kills something or something dies that turn, it gets lifesteal and quick draw, very efficient unit. And finally, Bandit Queen, which is another 4-drop, 3/2. When it comes into play, it has charge, and it triggers a +1/+0 and quick draw on all the units in play, to include herself. So using that combination of cards, you typically will get in there, develop a little bit of a board state, get in there with Bandit Queen, pushing extra damage in, and then obviously they'll try to kill her because she is the most efficient unit in your deck, and then you bring it back for another turn for a discount with Haunted Scream. Another notable is Crunch, the Yeti that is a 3/3 overwhelm, because once you make a contact with your opponent or infiltrate, you draw 2 cards and discard 1, so it creates a scenario where you are able to filter out your hand and kind of sculpt it to a win. And of course, with certain graveyard removal or void reoccurrence, you're able to pitch more effective units to the void to get them back at a discount. So that is Haunted Highway. It is the deck I decided to go with because when in doubt, I go with the more aggressive strategy to essentially kind of take advantage of my opponent's stalling. But all right, without further ado, we'll go ahead and go right into it and start with game 1. So game 1 was a loss. So I start off 0-1, and it was up against Winchest. They end up having 2 maidens back to back and a display to get them back, which ended up just being too much value. The maiden's inherent ability to turn a unit that goes to the void into a cudgel really hurts Haunted Highway, because now I have all these reoccurring or reanimation spells that just do nothing, and they are also getting cudgels in their hand, which makes their units larger, as well as hooking up a lifesteal or giving them targets to ship to the market and getting something legitimate out of the market without really losing a card. So the double maiden plus the display to get them back, at least one of them, if I remember correctly, was just too much for me to deal with, and I got overwhelmed and lost. Round 2 was up against a Found mid-range deck. This one ended up being a loss as well, so we're at 0-2 now. And they just had all the removal between Suffocate, Annihilate, I don't remember what else they had, Permafrost. They were able to keep my early aggression off the board entirely, minimizing my ability to attack back. I did get some hits in because obviously a significant amount of the units in the Haunted Highway do have charge. Towards the end of the game, ended up stalemating somewhere along the lines where I had, I believe it was 2 Grenadins and something. I think it was a Grenadin and a Merchant. And so I went to the market, picked up a Madness. They had a champion on the board that was now a 11-5, I believe. And so to try to capitalize on the win, I waited for an opening and my Madness the champion and swung for exactly lethal, I believe, or maybe a little excess. No, it had to be exactly lethal. I do remember that. I had exactly lethal on board by Madnessing, taking their champion. And when I swung, I had played around them having 1 removal spell. They ended up having 2 Annihilate, taking out both my units and keeping their champion. So I did not kill them, and then they killed me on the crackback. So that was a loss, 0-2. Round 3, we went up against Rakano. Shakedown on turn 2, I believe, ended up being huge. I was able to get rid of one of the 2 units in their hand, it being the sharpshooting duo, gunslinging duo. So I got rid of their lifesteal, and I ended up drawing, had 1 permafrost to deal with their Hojin, and ended up drawing 2 more to lock down the rest of their units, and that was enough for us to get us there. So finally racked up our first win for the tournament at 1-2. Going into game 4, we go up against another Winchest deck. We ended up curving out on them, I believe, turn 1 Crest, turn 2 able to seat, able to crank out a Dusk Raider or a champion, Skycrag champion. They end up drawing 0 removal throughout the course of the game, which is where Haunted Highway really screams out, pun intended. And we curved out and did so much damage they were not able to come back from that. I believe we actually might have even had a Berserked Highwayman, which, you know, obviously hits them for 9 damage total. which is just huge. So we took that game down fairly easily, going 2-2 now in the tournament. Moving right along, we go into our 5th round where we go up against a brew of Mono Justice. That's right. Let me catch we rushed them right away off the gates, really being aggressive. I believe we're on the play on this one, which I apologize. I did not write down whether I was on the play or not for these games. I actually will keep track of that from now on, just because I do think it is relevant, especially when playing aggressive decks. They had very little interaction. I think they might have had one pump spell and then either a Defiance or a Vanquish, but it was not enough. I believe they might have only gotten 2 units on the board, and we had a way to deal with one of them. So we took them down, dispatched them pretty easily, putting us at 3-2. Next up, we had, for round 6, we had Rakano Armory. It was a pseudo-standard build, but then they were really relying on both weapons and relic weapons. They ended up playing a card, which, forgive me, I don't recall what it was, but I believe it goes through the top 10 cards of your deck, discarding anything that's not a weapon, and then placing a weapon on a unit. By the time they went off on this, we had already started to dwindle down their life total. I don't think they were able to stick any form of lifesteal. They ended up placing 2 dark steel platings, or deep forge platings, on the gun bullet shaper. So, and if I recall correctly, because I think we would have been dead, it just came into play that turn, because yes, I believe they used its activated ability to cast the other spell. Anyways, long story short, they created a huge bullet shaper that we would have probably died to the next turn, but I had a madness in hand, took it, swinging with our already current board state, and took it down, putting us at 4-2. Going into round 7, we had we had FPS, which is Fire Primal Shadow, and I'm not really sure what the correct term for that one is, so I just left it at that. I probably should have looked it up, but it's all good. And they were pretty much too slow. They just kind of they weren't able to stem the bleeding that we were hitting them with on a regular basis. And of course, getting queen on turn 4 is just huge. We were able to get a queen down on turn 4, and then dark return it back on turn 5 to hit again. And then the following turn, scream back a champion for additional damage, and just kind of steamrolled them, putting us at 5-2. Round 8, we go up against Talir Combo, and it was looking pretty good for us. They were doing their standard stuff to stall the board state and develop things. I believe I misplayed a Combust, using it too soon to remove don't remember what it was now. Maybe it was a merchant, and they ended up playing the ambassador, 3/5 ambassador that drew them 2 cards, or 2 sigils. And so I didn't have solid removal for that, and they ended up just kind of comboing off probably the turn before we had lethal. I believe we had lethal on the board. I might have had a Highwayman or Haunted Scream or something in hand to trigger and kill them. I do remember that, and they just went off and killed us, putting us at 5-3 with the loss. Going into round 9, we go up against Ixtun Control. This is going to be Fire Primal Justice. So they had a really slow start. Correction, we had a really slow start. I believe we didn't play a unit till turn 4, which might have been Bandit Queen or Haunted Highway, or Highwayman. I remember that. And so I played it obviously because it's a tournament, but I was not feeling very good about this. Like not having a turn 1 or turn 2 play, sometimes you get away with. Not having a turn 3 play, that means for aggressive deck, we're just doing stone cold nothing. So even coming down on turn 4, but it just kind of worked out for us. They were able to remove things, but we just kind of kept chipping at them with charge units. And then finally, once they started to really stabilize, they played Aliza for the 6/12 that silences or does 6 damage or something like that, what comes into play, which was looking really bad for us. I either mark it or top deck the Madness to take it over and then attack with whatever board state we had, which I believe was a Highwayman and a Bandit Queen, and finish them off for the win, putting us at 6-3. Man, telling you what, Madness doing some work in these games. For round 10, we go up against Genev Peaks or Genev Value, or however you want to classify it. The deck just did what it does, outvaluing us, and our curve lined up poorly. I.e., the Equivocate on 2, having the Merchant on 3, stalling on 4 with either Display or Torch, and Sandstorm Titan, and then going into Moonstone and going into Heart of the Vault, and then Zoe. Like, they just curved out really well on us, maybe even a peak. Like I said, my details are kind of cliff notes, so because I was live streaming during this, so I don't want to spend too much time. But their curve just ended up balancing out really well for us. Heart of the Vault is 90% of the time going to kill something and draw them a card. I believe they might have actually had a 0-cost Equivocator Torch, so that didn't help any, because obviously you can't play around them having a 0-cost spell. So we ended up losing there, ended up in 6-4 after 10 rounds. So not gonna lie, not doing great, but feeling okay about it. I was not planning on doing extremely well in this ECQ, but still, I was happy that so far I had a winning record. All right, sorry about that. Round 11, we go up against Praxis Splashing Justice. A very light splash. I don't even believe I saw anything why they were splashing. But they open up with a Zuberi, which on curve, which was very scary for me because I had no solid removal, i.e. Combust for it or Annihilate. So I ended up having the Permafrost it, so I didn't take a beating to it. That scared me a lot because I knew everything they were going to draw was having double damage. I had no idea what was in their deck, but it was going to be an issue. They then followed it up by taking Urn of the Burning Embers and place it on me, thus negating another part of the deck, which we are very weak to. Now it shuts down Haunted Highway, and I believe in this game I actually had Haunted Scream, 2 Haunted Screams, and a Dark Return to my hand, or something insane like that, where I was extremely disappointed. It did give me plenty of market fodder, but it just sat there in my hand when I feel like we might have had that chance to take it down. But the Urn just completely shut that down. So we ended up making a really poor attack, and I think it was fine, but they ended up having double dysfunction, which at fast speed removed 2 permafrosts we had on their units to include the Zuberi, and it removed 2 of our units. Ended up being really poor attacked, but somehow we managed to lock up the board and stall it, and they got to a point where they were just drawing sigils and things that just weren't affecting the board. And believe it or not, we actually took that game down. So just the value of Haunted Highway there, even with the Urn, like I think we just ended up getting all our 4 drops back to back to back. And even Bandit Queen, even if she herself is not able to attack, the summon ability is what gives everyone the +1/+0 in quick draw. So I think we were just able to continue to push through with Highwaymen and Champions and stuff, even if we didn't get the full value of the charge, and took that one down. Round 12, we go up against Aurelian. This is going to be Justice Time Shadow, and never got the second fire influence, so we were stuck. We had a good hand, 3 sigils. I thought it was fine. I think we ended up drawing the contracts, or the ones that you need, 2 influence or less to pick one. If not, it's just undepleted power. And literally went the entire game never seeing the second fire, to the point where the deck just ran us maybe not run us over, but we died with 2 Highwaymen and 2 Bandit Queens in our hand, which was so frustrating. It's extremely difficult not to tilt when that happens, because with that kind of gas we would have probably had a good chance to win, if not easily won, depending on the way the game played out. I believe they might have even had several 1 health units that could have taken down with Highwaymen to gain some life and just all the good stuff. But sometimes it happens. That's how variance works. So you got to take your lick your wounds and take them. So we end up losing that one, being at 7-5 so far. Not feeling pretty good about myself. This is typically what we were going to do. We had such a good win streak, and then now we're going win-loss. But hey, we got to play it out. I kept checking up on the updates to see how everyone else was doing, and it didn't seem too horrible for us. We were creeping up. We were between 200 and 100 at this point, so I figured it was worth playing out. Next up, for round 13, we go up against the Maul. This is the Elysian or Time Primal deck that capitalizes on the card Maul, doing double damage to you based on the number of cards in your hand. So this ended up being a real grind fest, despite the matchup being two very aggressive decks. Reason being is they ended up playing 3 over the course of the game, and them all sticking, because I believe I had to permafrost one of them. The 3/4 that summons Nightfall and then gains you 4 health if you start your turn with Nightfall. So this was I was hitting them. They weren't making very good blocks, but they kept gaining life. I had a decent defense, I guess, so somehow they couldn't attack me either. But it finally got to the point where I was, like I said, I permafrost 1. We had some berserk triggers going on because Dusk Raider was left on the board on my side. And so back-to-back Bandit Queens plus a Madness on one of their larger 3/4s that they might have pumped and stuff like that just ended up being enough damage to push through with all the quick draw. They couldn't make good blocks, and believe it or not, we actually got there. They did concede, but we started to chip to the point where they just didn't feel like they were going to take it back. So sweet, we won that one. I do think Maul is a good matchup for us, but we'll talk about that a little more in the after actions review at the end of this. So next up, round 14, we go up against Genève. Yay, this is great. And as expected, we got them down to 7 life, which was pretty surprising. But then they triple titaned me, like literally Sandstorm Titan, Sandstorm Titan, Sandstorm Titan, and Sandstorm Titan. And our deck is not very well equipped to take them out without the Madness Combust combo, where we're essentially getting 2 of their cards for 2 of ours. If not, we're still kind of trading down. We're giving up 1 to 2 to 3 cards occasionally to take down the Titans, and it's just really effective at us. Shuts down the Scream because of the fact that none of our units can have flying anymore. And I believe that ended up being the case. I was working my strategy towards chipping in the last bits of damage with Scream, and then with the Titans, it was just not able to pull off a Queen or a Highwayman or a Crunch out of the market to do out of the void to do enough damage. So we lose to Genève, putting us at 8-6. Feeling a little discouraged, but the show must go on. So round 15, we go up against Skycrag Control, which I'll be honest with you, I really don't even remember. I just remember them not having your stereotypical aggressive attack. They did have the 5/2 dragon that when it hits infiltrates, make the top card of your deck cheaper by 5. We did madness it one time to kill another one of their units with Combust after I hit them with it, and then they got a second one, but it didn't matter by that point. We ran them over, putting us at 9-6. Giving me a little bit of encouragement. Going into round 16, we're up against Winchest again. Oh no. Their only removal though was Torch. They had 1 Torch, which if I remember correctly, they used on turn 2. And really, I'm still trying to figure out if our deck is supposed to play around the Torch or not. But I do remember I end up throwing out the champion on turn 2 to get torched and playing the Dusk Raider on turn 3, feeling that, excuse me, I apologize guys, feeling that the Inspire Berserk would be a better way to get back in this game than the 4 damage, so I walked it that way. It turns out that the only other thing they had going on was Avara not even on curve, so I'm really not sure if they kept the expensive hand or what. We just kind of answered their threats, and they played Avara, let it go up to a 5/6, had the madness to take it, and that was enough to seal the deal. making me feel pretty darn good now. Got 2 wins in a row and putting us at 10-6, which is a pretty respectable record at this point. Honestly, it's not amazing, but it was respectable considering we are over the halfway mark. So going into round 17, we go up against Genève, and I'm not feeling good about this considering the butt whooping we got earlier. But I ended up having three Bandit Queens and got them low enough that even through a Heart of the Vault and a Titan on board, I had a torch sitting in my hand. I do remember holding on to it for several turns because they just had open mana on 3 cards in hand or open power, and they were attacking me, but luckily I was able to stay at a higher enough life total that we were in decent standing. And finally, when they fired off the display to, I believe, either kill a unit or burn me or something like that, I ended up torching them in response and taking the win down. So 2 of our bad matchups, I'd like to think somewhat, we ended up taking wins away, so putting us with 3 wins in a row at 11-6, and I'm feeling pretty darn good at this point, not gonna lie. Going into round 18, we go up against Winchester. Oh my god, will it ever end? And they ended up board wiping us twice. So I believe the first time it was a little bit of a slow start, which I didn't feel good about, but you just have to get, a couple units on the board and put some pressure. They board wiped us. Then obviously very rarely do you ever play around the second one, so I extended again. Maybe I do remember still kind of being comfortable with 2 units on the board, so I left 1 in the hand. And so we never really stalled out, and then in the end I just ended up stealing either Zoe or Rizon with Madness, doing the damage that they were not expecting. And oh no, I take that back, I'm sorry. Yeah, we got them low enough, and then the second board wipe cleaned us out, and we were sitting there. They were going to start to come back with a Rizon, and I stole it to kill them for the win. Yeah, that's what it was. They played the Rizon to get the last of our units out because I did play her on the board. Played 1 unit, they Rizdoned it, and then before they could swing with Rizon, I stole it with Madness to kill them. So yeah, Madness once again being a heavy hitter. Next up, we have yet another Winchester deck for round 19. So I'm not excited about this. I believe I misplayed a Permafrost, not taking down the Rizon. So we had dealt with the Vara, we had dealt with the Merchants, and we had seen 2 Zoes from them. And it was my fault for not keeping track of when the treasure troves trigger had happened, but obviously that's not a 100% guarantee that they did put them in the market or didn't pull them out, etc., etc. And so they played a Rizon. I had the ability to permafrost it, but I felt like we might have had another chance to deal with it or something like that. And I expected to see the Zoe soon, and I realized that if they drew a bunch of cards and cleared our board with the Zoe, that we were definitely behind. So I held on to the permafrost. They ended up playing around it really well and never played a Zoe till they already kind of got back in the game. The Zoe did not have, or the Rizon did not have lifesteal at the moment. 2 turns later, it did get lifesteal and stuff like that, and it was just enough to come back. Like I said, they never played the Zoe, so that was my fault. I believe if I did stop the Rizon from gaining them life, then with the permafrost, then I could have potentially pushed through the Zoe and won. So that was a misplay on me. Ended up costing us the game. So we're 12-7 at this point. I go up and check the scores, and believe it or not, the top 64, I believe there were people there with 8 and 9 losses. So I feel like I still had a good shot of doing this. So I'm still positive, and I pushed forward into round 20. We go up against Winchester again. Yay. Didn't have any removal for an early maiden that they cast, and it just ended up giving them too much value. I really do think the Winchester matchups really come down to maiden. It just horrendously stops our game plan. It blocks most of our units pretty well, and literally only being highwaymen and a fully buffed champion that can get through it consistently. And even then it still dies, but at least it takes it with it. It also matches up really poorly against Combust because we still lose our unit to the Maiden. So not having a removal spell for it it just ended up hurting us too much. They got too much value off of it, and we ended up losing that one pretty easily, 12-8 after round 20. Once again, looking up at the score, now I'm starting to kind of get a little discouraged. We have 8 rounds to go, and I can only potentially lose 2 more games before being knocked out. But show must go on, and we play on. So going to round 21, going up again against Winchest, and I am not feeling good about this. But turns out we curved out, and they did not stick a maiden, and at the end of the game, we went back-to-back screams for the win. And that's where the Hana Highway really values. If we're just able to curve out how, 2, 3, 4, and then do 2 spells on turn 5, it just really sets the bar high for a mid-range or control deck to come back from that. And the reoccurrence of charge units just for value is just huge. So we ended up taking it down, putting us at 13-8. Feeling still pretty good about this. A little bit. I would say in the middle of the road. Then we go up against Maul for round 22. And like I said, I believe Maul's a good matchup, so I felt good about this. They ended up overextending, trying to get in early damage, because obviously they were trying to get us down to that 14-8 life point range. So Maul will do the trick. And obviously us being an aggressive deck, we end up emptying our hand pretty quickly. So we threw the scales off by hitting Berserk on a couple of our units, and that was enough to close the deal and give us the win. Like I said, a Berserked Highwayman definitely hitting, and obviously the Maul decks have plenty of 1 toughness units. So a Highwayman coming down, killing a unit, giving itself lifesteal, and then attacking for a quick draw. 4 points 2 times means an 8-point or 16-point life swing, which is huge, and thus why we were able to take that one, putting us at 14-8. Next up for round 23, we have Combray Chains. That's right, that's Time Justice trying to ramp up into Chains or Pit of Lanaka. And there we immediately started thinking, okay, we have to be prepared for the Ambassador and the Martial Ironthorn. Turns out we guessed it correctly, and they did play the Martial Ironthorn, which I immediately combusted. And then we followed it up with 2 Highwaymen, 2 Queens, and a Champion. And it was just enough to completely overwhelm the deck, even through all their merchants to kind of stem the bleeding. And we took it down with little to no stress on our part, putting us at 15-8. So I am super excited right now. I am looking up at the leaderboards and looking at what we have left. And it looks like if I can go 3-2 in the last set of rounds, then I am guaranteed a spot in top 8 or top 64. Sorry. If I go 2-3, then I am not locked up for it, but I am in the record of the last 10 people, I believe, in top 64. So 54 to 64, obviously down, I think, to about 80 was at that record. So if my tiebreakers were better, I was going to have a slot in. So I was feeling good. Like I felt like I was doing well enough to where I can go 2-3 at the very least. But if I can actually within my grasp hit 3-2, then I'm locked up for a Sunday berth. So let's see what happens. Go into round 24, going up against Genève. And this one's actually piloted by Jonah Vale, a very popular streamer. And he just had the best answers for my early game in the means of 3 permafrost. And permafrost is very bad for us. We, other than using a combust to send the unit to the void, we really don't have a good way of breaking it. It also really hinders our strategy because the units can no longer attack and they're not in the void, so we can hunt and scream them back. So permafrost, our early game, did really well. I think he also had the equivocate, and he stopped all our early aggression. Like I think I might have ended up doing somewhere along the point of 3 to 5 points of damage to him. Somehow we still managed to kind of pull off doing damage and got him pretty low to the point where he was at 5 or 6. And with nothing going on, he had a pretty strong board state. I think he already started to swing back at us finally once he stabilized, but he couldn't swing completely because I still had a board state going on. We drew 2 torches, but he had been holding on to several cards for several turns and had under depleted power every turn. So I decided to wait and hold off for an opening, which never came. He is a very skilled player and obviously played around things like that, since that was the only way he was going to lose the game. And he ended up he just swung for lethal. And so having nothing else to do, I believe he used Equivocate to get like a blocker off the board. So I had to use that as my opening. So I tried to torch him once, and he had the backlash to counter it. And then just for the rub, or, just for, I don't know why, I ended up showing him the second torch and trying to torch him again. And he had the display to counter it. So he actually had double counter spell, which means there was no way we were going to win that game. And we lose, putting us at 15-9. So a little discouraged, but it was a bad matchup against a very skilled player. So such is life. We move on to round 25. We go up against Winchest. So we're kind of, it's not the best matchup, but it does revolve around Maiden, and Variance hits me. We end up being stuck with no fire for too long, and we get double harsh ruled. So there was no way for us to catch up. And Winchest just kind of does what Winchest does, runs me over and racks up the second loss for the last 5. So it puts me at 15-10. And now I literally have to sweep the last 3 games to take advantage of this, what I think was a good record for me. So I'm a little discouraged, but I'm also pumped at the same time, if that could be the case. Like, I'm a bit of a realist. So for round 26, we go up against Scrappy Hour, which is the deck that I believe took down the last ECQ, which is a really good matchup for Winchest. It pretty much Stone Scar revolves around Witching Hour and making a ton of Grenadins to come up the board and fight through board wipes and whatnot. We started with a good hand, having 2 units in it and, some interaction and stuff like that. And Variance hits us, and we never drew another unit. Literally, I think I went 5 or 6, maybe even 7 turns. I know the stream was laughing with me. We just never drew a unit. They dealt with the first 2 units, and that was the end of it. And by the time we did finally start to kind of get back in the game, they Witching Hour. We burned a ton of resources to deal with it the best we could, and they followed it up the next turn with another Witching Hour. So we were just out of that game, losing it, putting us at 15-11, and with that, taking me out of the top 64. And I was pretty disappointed. I normally go into these tournaments expecting to do average because I see myself as an average player, but the fact that I was having a good day, I was really hoping it might have been the day where I break day 2, but sadly not this one. But we already have 2 games left, so let's see if I can at least stay in the top 500 and earn 5 extra packs. So going into round 27, we go up against the Maul deck. Hey, this sounds great, right? It's a good matchup for us. So we go at it, and it turns out it's a long, drawn-out, back-and-forth match, a little closer than the earlier Maul game was, or the ones that we've played before. And I end up going on full tilt. And I mean complete, total tilt. Turns out that the writing on the wall, our opponent was going to maul us next turn. We had, I believe, either way, they were going to maul us next turn, and we were going to die if we didn't dump our hand. And I got so focused on this that I ended up playing 3 cards to include permafrosting to break an Aegis, and then torching the unit, which was obviously a merchant, and then playing a unit to get as much out of our hand as possible. Our opponent was at 4, so I just didn't think about the torch, being a thing, right? And then I passed the turn, seeing the maul, just kind of hoping that they don't get the maul or don't have the 6 power. But like I said, I just assumed they got the maul with the merchant. And obviously Nightfall triggers immediately, bringing them to 3. And I just full tilt because they have the maul and kill me. Obviously, I know it doesn't matter. I was already out of contention for the top 64, but giving away a loss like that in a tournament, and when I'm trying to play in the top 100 or stay in the top 100, I don't know. I consider myself a better player than that. So that bugged me. So I tilted for a little bit. Chat consoled me and whatnot. And I figured let's finish off the tournament. So I wasn't as tilted, but I kind of feel like I was. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I was kind of going through the motions the last game. And believe it or not, we go up against the mirror match. That's right. Haunted Highway for round 28 of the ECQ. And their curve just ended up, I feel like it lined up better than ours did. So they just end up doing a little more damage, a little bit quicker. And we end up losing that one as well. Once again, I probably was still on half tilt and not playing my best anymore. And so finished off the ECQ at 15-13, and at the time I ended the match, I was at exactly rank 100, which also told me that I wasn't going to stay there and I was going to lose below that. So such is life. Still fairly happy with the showing. Like, honestly, minus that 5 loss streak at the end, I think if 1 or 2 of those were wins, I would have been at 17-11, which for me is extremely respectable. I've been way happier with that. So that was my round by round tournament breakdown. Hope you guys got a little bit out of that. Let's go into the final notes. What I got out of the tournament, kind of breaking down the meta and stuff, and see if it helps you guys for your next tournament. So first things first, I want to go ahead and just address the elephant in the room. Prep for Winchest. FJS is just a thing. It's never going anywhere unless they do something major to it. Everyone plays it. I play it. It has the most interchangeable cards, so it's easier to craft those because you don't feel like they're for a niche deck. So make sure your deck is good against Winchest because you're going to see a lot of it. For Haunted Highway, I think a lot of it really revolved around Maiden. Everything else I more or less could have dealt with in some form or fashion, but Maiden's ability to have Death Touch, so it's gonna trade for something. It has the potential of coming down early, and most importantly, getting rid of units that go to the void and turning them into cudgels is just huge. Like, the games that we won against Winchest, we either handled the Maiden immediately or they didn't see it. Versus the games where the Maiden just stuck, we were just so disadvantaged. Next up, Maul, I think, is actually a really good matchup for us. Even though they get out the gate a little bit quicker, we are able to unload our hand fairly quickly, gain some life in the process, and really kind of aggro them. And the fact that they have plenty of units with 1 toughness matches up really well with Highwaymen being essentially a 2-for-1 on them. So Maul is less effective of us, and we have a stronger aggro plan. So I think Maul, believe it or not, actually is a good matchup for us, especially when we're on the play. Next up is Rakano is a good matchup for us. Once again, I think we are more aggressive than they are, and we have a slightly better removal package, especially to include Madness, which if they end up Voltroning a unit, which you can almost expect them to get a plate on something, if it doesn't kill you, you are able to immediately take it with the Madness and swing back and do it against them. And they're normally not prepped to handle that. And so we win. And they can't, and neither decks are really trying to block. So as long as a Highwayman or a Torch or something takes out Hojin and they have limited life gain, we've got it. Genev is a horrible matchup for us. They just have too many value cards that end up being a 2-for-1 in their favor against us. And so with that, unless we have a really good lineup, curve out on them with our removal matching well against what they got going on, which, mind you, our biggest spell is going to be Permafrost, which is negated against Titan and Moonstone champion. So it just Guardian, sorry. So it is a very bad matchup for us. And yeah, I mean, if we can Madness a Zalchi and then combust it, that's awesome. We are kings of the world. But if not, we are in really bad shape. And, peaks is a thing. We have to take a whole turn off of attacking to kill the peaks. And so that gives them a lot of life gain as well. Next up, our aggression can take down most fringe decks. I think the fact that Haunted Highway is able to get such explosive turns, especially if you do Grenadin Drone into Champion, into Highwayman, into Bandit Queen, like, we're just pushing for so much damage so quickly that any of these fringe strategies aren't able to handle that. And so we're the fun police and take that down really easily. Every fringe deck I came across in the ladder or in the tournament, I ended up taking down with little ease, or with little difficulty rather. I ended up losing primarily to the big name ones. Don't think the time you play matters for better wins. So I ended up playing all the way from 7 p.m. Friday till about 2 in the afternoon on Saturday, and I believe I felt like I was going up against the same skill level of people throughout the entire time. So I really don't think you can wargame or kind of level up on when you play the tournament to maximize your wins trying to go up against the least skilled people, especially with somewhere of around 1,000 people playing. It's really tough. You know, not only skill level, but there's also matchups and things like that. You don't know what deck people are playing. So I would just play whenever it's convenient for you. And lastly, if you tilt, take advantage of the fact that you don't have to play all the games back to back to back. It's not a real life tournament. You're not locked into rounds, taking up everyone's space and things like that. So if you tilt like I did, I ended up sticking around because I normally I don't tilt very easily. I was just kind of hard on myself, but I normally shake off losses pretty quickly. But it was also one round left after that, so I figured I'd just finish it off of the stream. But if you're not, by all means, walk away, do something else, play something else, another game, go eat something, reset so you come back at 100% and you're not kind of still sinking with the feelings and thoughts of the game before. So yeah, guys, that is it. I hope you enjoyed that. I will do a quick little look over. We did get some spoilers over the ECQ tournament, and so I feel like it goes well with this topic, and so I'm going to cover it. But real quick, like I said, that is my tournament breakdown. Hope you enjoyed it. If you guys would like to hear other episodes like this, by all means, leave me a message in the comments below, and I'll take a look at them and take that into consideration when designing future podcasts and episodes and stuff like that. All right, so spoilers. We have 4 spoilers so far. 3 new ones were released during the ECQ, so I won't talk about the first one, which was Virgo, because we mentioned it in the last episode. So going into the first one is Glass Hopper. This is a 1/3 cockroach for 2 at a time, and your units with pledge cost 1 less. So it's a pseudo ramp spell for pledge specific cards. And then it says summon. If you pledge the unit this game, I'm pretty much, unless they change the mechanic, it's only going to be 1 unit on your first turn. Create and draw a copy of that unit. So on the surface, a 1/3 for 2 is completely serviceable. Reading the text, the pledge cost 1, and the fact that it revolves around pledge. Real quick, the upside to it is making your pledge units 1 cheaper is really solid, because typically most of the cards that you are going to play that are pledge worthy are slightly expensive. So making them come down a turn earlier or just be 1 cheaper really does kind of make a decent impact, especially since it is in time. So you combo it off with other ramp spells, it really can impact the game quite a bit. The fact that it is on a body also makes it like you're not sacrificing too much to do it. The summon ability is actually really interesting. One thing of note is in constructed, when you are running 4 of these, each one will trigger the same summon. So at the beginning of the game, you pledge 1 unit. Every time you play a Glass Hopper, you're going to get another copy of that unit. So you're essentially drawing a fairly efficient card instead of a random card from your deck. So I think that ability is really strong. That being said, for both those things to matter, I would want to play no less than 12 pledge units in your deck. Like, I feel like if you're running only 4 or 8 for constructed, obviously, it is not really enough to guarantee you do the pledge or even want to pledge, and that you're getting enough value out of Glass Hopper. Because at the end of the day, if you don't pledge a unit, it's just going to end up being a 1/3 for 2. And if you don't have a lot of pledge units in your deck, the discount or the ramp cost may not come into play that much. For limited, I feel like it might actually be more efficient or more effective, because of the fact that if the draft, never mind, this is in the campaign, they're not going to be drafted. I take that back. I digress. Let's move on. Sorry about that. That was funny. At least I caught myself. I would have felt dumb if I went into a long drawn out plan about this and then everyone was listening to this being like, they're not unlimited. Next up we have, and I totally missed one. Give me a second. There we go. Next up, we have Door Knocker. This is a +1/+0 weapon for 4 double fire, and it has double damage, So very similar to, it's not double barrel, right? Yeah, it is double barrel, except you're getting the +1 to attack, but it has some additional text. If you have no unit, you can play Door Knocker welded by a 0-3 helpful door bot. So for those of you that play MTG, this is very similar to the Germ or Living Weapon mechanic from Phyrexia Besieged or Mirrodin Besieged or whatnot, and where it is a weapon, you could slap it on another unit and it does do some work. You could slap it on something with lifesteal and now you're talking about huge life swings. But if it's late game, you're top decking and you realize that you just need to get a unit on the board, it will create a unit for itself, which is relevant. It is a 1-3 double damage, so you can slap another weapon on top of that, or the fact that it still attacks as a 2-3 or defends. So not bad. I think it seems a little underpowered, but they typically, game designers value the flexibility of a card. So if a card has multiple modes or can do several things, even if none of the things put to separate are very powerful, the fact that you're able to do multiple things on one card to fit the scenario makes it significantly more powerful in general. And that's why they tend to overcost those a little bit. I think the card is fine, but I personally am not super excited to play it. There's just way better things to be doing. 4 is kind of like that in between. But yeah, I think there's better things to do it. So I'm not very high on it, but I do think there's some decks that are going to try it. Maybe you keep it in the market. That could be a thing. But yeah, that's Door Knocker. And our final preview card for this episode is Andric the Renegade Priest. This is a 2-4 Rebel Cleric at rare. It is 4 power at Aurelian, which is Time Justice Shadow. It has Pledge, which obviously we're seeing the running theme. And it says when a player draws an additional card, increase its cost by 3. Of note, this is any player, both you and your opponent. And it has in power, give another one of your units, i.e. not Andric, +4/+2 this turn. So Pledge, obviously solid, especially in Trifaction, so it fixes your influence. It combos with Glasshopper. Now let's break down the text. A 2-4 body for 4 is just mediocre. Honestly, it's a little under par. I'm not very thrilled about that. They're really relying on the text box. So Empower is great. Aurelian is the kind of faction that cares about sigils coming into play and triggering a bunch of things. So you can slap a +4/+2 on a unit like Vara or something with lifesteal or deadly, just to kind of get in there and get extra damage. Something with double damage would be huge. So it will change combat math and do some work, especially if you have alternate means of triggering Empower while in combat, i.e. the display or Seraph's Beacon or the Beach Ball Colossus. So that could be relevant and it could make a difference. I don't know how much of a difference. I don't know if it's enough to make a difference based on the undercosted body. You can also do it on a Hojin. That would definitely let Hojin get in there for the beat. Now, the important part of the text. When a player draws an additional card, increase its cost by 3. Not only is this symmetrical, so it hits both sides of the board, I actually think this card is really bad right now because of the fact that absolutely everyone is using merchants. It is just the way the meta works right now. They are phenomenal cards, triggering a pseudo sideboard for best of 1, and that counts as drawing a card. So you are essentially putting this card in your deck, pretty much hoses every single deck out there in some form or fashion, but it also hoses you with, so unless you're going to design your market where you have a bunch of cheap spells and it doesn't really matter, or you're not going to play a market, which I feel is going to significantly handicap your deck, that this Renegade Priest, unless the meta changes, it's just not going to see play because it's not one of those abilities right now where there's any deck in the format which is okay doing that. Like maybe Maul, but obviously Maul adds another color to this faction, so it's not going to work. So yeah, I'm not very excited about Andric. I think it could potentially warp the format just because everyone is drawing additional cards in some form or fashion. It does hose things like Temporal Time and FJS with Zoe and display, and quarry. So it does hose more decks than others, but it does hose absolutely every deck. So all right, guys, that's it. Oh, just about an hour. Sweet. Doing pretty good. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Once again, if you like the content, make sure you're hitting that follow button or subscribe button or whatever else, alert button, depending on what platform you are listening to this on. You can catch me on Twitter, Patreon, and YouTube at EJthePodcast. And you can see my real life stuff on Instagram at CesarLabare7. CesarLabare, the number 7. And you can catch my live streams every Tuesday and Saturday afternoons, and potentially a couple of early mornings during the weekdays at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. In the show notes, there'll also be the Discord, link to the Discord, and our Gmail address if you want to give me feedback personally. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time. Thanks again for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the video this week. If you'd like to continue to see other content like this, make sure you hit the subscribe and alert buttons to find out when new videos are posted. Also, stay in contact with me at EJthePodcast on Twitter and at gmail.com. And watch my live streams at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ, where you can catch me streaming live drafts, singletons, and constructed formats. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.